VikesNow. I am Dustin Baker. We're draft eve is where we're at, and this will be our final transmission before the draft, and we'll have stuff certainly after the draft and henceforth. But this is it. This is the long lead up to a major event. I have Jackson McIntire on the show today. How are you, man?
Hey, I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, we're doing fantastic. For viewers who don't know your work, tell us a little bit about yourself before we get cracking with these questions.
Yeah, so before I was at PFF starting in 2016 all the way up until about 2 months ago where I left the sports world for just an opportunity outside of sports.
Okay.
I was writing for the Daily Norseman Viking fan page on SB Nation. Before that, I was at the Viking Age way back when. That was 2012, I think how I kind of started with sports writing and all that. And I worked part-time at PFF while I was in college. And then when I graduated in 2019, I became full-time. I was a full-time analyst. Okay. And then in 2022, I became a senior analyst, and I began finalizing grades for quarterbacks, receivers, coverage defenders, and working closely with teams, with coaches, and just kind of ironing out schemes and all type of different things, mainly focused on quarterbacks, coverage, and receivers. But yeah, that's my background, and here we are now.
You must have a really good job now if you left that.
Yeah, it was hard to pass on. So
yeah, I hear
I'm a data analyst outside of sports. So
okay,
the grind during season kind of got to me after a few years. It was tough to enjoy the sport when you're working so much. So
okay,
yeah,
that's fair. Yeah.
Before we jump into the first few questions, are you at heart a Vikings fan, or are you agnostic when it comes to the Vikings?
I am. I mean, I'm an NFL fan first, I would say, but I'm a big Viking fan. Vikings have always been my team. My grandpa was a big. This is super contradictory, but he was a huge Texas and Oklahoma fan.
Oh yeah.
So back in 2005, 6, he was a big Adrian Peterson guy, and I'd always watch those Oklahoma games where Adrian Peterson was just running wild. And because we didn't have a team in LA at the time, where I live then and still live now. Mm-hmm. I kind of just you kind of just have to pick the team that you root for. Mm-hmm. And so with Adrian Peterson entering the draft, I was like, wherever this guy goes, that's my team. And here we are. So.
Okay. All right. That's the parallel. Yeah. All right. We'll take it. All right. I'm going to hand it off to Josh for the first question of the episode. Mind you, sir, we have about 29 hours for the draft. So let's get going.
We're close. So obviously draft week kind of got started with a big trade. With Zach Wilson heading over to the Denver Broncos, a team that, at least reportedly, has been in the mix for a quarterback throughout this draft process. Do you think that this Zach Wilson trade kind of eliminates them from at least trading up in the draft and being sort of a competitor of the Minnesota Vikings? Or do you still think that they're probably going to try to go get their guy in this draft?
Yeah, so it's kind of twofold. I don't think it eliminates them. I view it a lot like the Sam Darnold signing, where you kind of get a guy who hasn't worked out, has all the traits. You hope for the best. It's a low risk, high upside, but long shot type of a move. I would say probably more of a long shot than the Darnold signing. But I mean, if anyone's going to bring out what Wilson might have it somewhere deep inside of him, it's probably going to be a guy like Sean Payton. So I do like it, but it's more of a luxury signing. I don't think it's something that prevents them from trading up if that's their play. However, they don't have the same type of ammo that other teams like the Vikings or like the Giants have. And so I don't really see them as like a realistic, like top 3 type trade up. Maybe a few picks, like maybe Atlanta to 8 or something like that. But I don't think like they're much of a threat to get to the top 3, especially with how that Russell Wilson trade went and just diminishing all those picks. And I don't think that that's something they want to jump right back into again.
Yeah, that Russell Wilson thing is kind of what's been my hang up for them being a team that would try to move all this sort of draft capital, move heaven and high water to try to get to one of the top 5 picks to get a quarterback. And then, I mean, we just did this 2 years ago and it didn't work out. And now we're doing it again. Is it any different this time around? I mean, obviously from a Viking standpoint, hopefully it can be a little bit different this time around, but yeah, I've kind of been on the same page, but I think 12 at least is definitely a spot where I don't know. Sean Payton's crazy that he might think Zach Wilson is his answer, but I wouldn't rule out a quarterback either.
Yeah.
Jackson, on the quarterback thing in Denver, do you think it's more after this Wilson move, seeing that in the flesh, is it more likely that their solution would be to say, you know what, we get Bo Nix or Michael Penix, we got a summer competition going? Do you think it diminishes their thirst to trade up the board and so much that they would just draft Bo Nix or Michael Penix, or do you think it's completely like it just doesn't mean anything in regard to their trade up, I guess, capability?
No, I don't think it means much.
Okay.
I think it's more of just a luxury, like, hey, we hope this works out.
Okay.
It was what, a 6th or 7th round pick or pick
Yeah, it's
swap
kind
or
of like the
something
Josh
that.
Dobbs trade.
Yeah, it's just it's a flyer on a guy who theoretically has high upside, and the hope that Peyton will help that work out. But
okay, well, damn you, Jackson. We were hoping the Broncos would be wiped off the board if they're even a competitor at all for trading up for Drake May or whatnot. The next thing I want to ask you, and this is a confession. The reason I had you on the show is because I read your Spencer Rattler thread about 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And to that point, you were the only human that I had seen that said this guy could blow our socks off and go in the first round. So I want you, it was a lengthy thread. If you're kind enough, can you put that into words? And do you stand by that hot take or bold prediction?
So that's kind of like my calling the NFL's bluff thing.
Yeah.
Like, people are not talking about him, and he's someone who the talent should warrant a lot more discussion. And I don't know if he's going to be a first round pick. I think that there's a sneaky chance that he could sneak in that, like, one of those teams trading back up into the end of the first to get that 5th year option. Maybe how I view Spencer Rattler is I think that he's an incomplete evaluation. So he had such terrible talent around him that offensive line just is, the tape they put on was horrendous. There was, outside of Leggett, he had no one to throw to. It was like an NFL style scheme, which was like kind of fun to watch, but at the same time, so referencing the Clemson game, which is just kind of a snapshot into what he was dealing with. He had 38 dropbacks. 21 of those 38 he was pressured on. That's well over 50%. And then of the 17 that he wasn't, I don't have the exact number, but a handful of those were screens. On top of that, his receivers in that game had a 20% drop rate on catchable passes. Man. 20, so 1 out of 5 catchable passes they were dropping. And it's just how do you work with that? Like, you can't really watch that tape and say like, oh, there were some decision-making issues. He threw into double coverage too much. But a lot of that, I think, was just like, hell, he's been pressured 21 out of 38 dropbacks. He has to get the ball up at some point. And I think that it just led to this incomplete evaluation.
Okay.
We know he has arm talent. We know he has some scrambling ability. We know that the natural talent aspect is there. And it would be unfair to just say, you know what, if he had the proper scheme around him, if he had a good line, if he had good receivers, et cetera, then he would have been excellent. So we should take him in the top 5. Like, that's not fair either, because he didn't do that. And plenty of guys with that talent get all of that around them and still fail. So we can't just give him like credit for something he didn't do. But at the same time, we can say that this guy has everything that the modern NFL looks for in a quarterback, and wasn't really given a fair shot to show it. If you want to go way back to Oklahoma, where Caleb, the number 1 pick and one of the most talented players in recent memory, beat him out, sure, yes, that happened. But that was also Caleb Williams, and that was also, 4 years ago, maybe, something like that. So It's just, it's not fair to do that, I don't think. And so when we're looking at this guy, you compare him to a guy like Bo Nix, right? Bo Nix has a better chance to be Andy Dalton, maybe Andy Dalton plus slightly, like a little bit more than that. But at the end of the day, that's somebody who, second contract comes around. Honestly, maybe Purdy's a better comparison for him. Someone like Purdy, where you get him, he plays really well on that rookie deal, and then you get to that second contract and you're like, do we pay this guy who doesn't really elevate us that much? But now we're looking at paying him 40-45 million. And once you pay him, you're screwed. Like where the 49ers are likely going to be in a couple years now. And so that's what you're looking at with Bo Nix. And there's also the chance he's Colt McCoy. So, he's risky in itself. But I just look at that and I'm like, yeah, give me the guy who I don't know much about. Sure, way more likely he's a bust than Bo Nix. But at the same time, you have a chance at like a legit top 10 quarterback if the stuff we didn't know ended up being stuff that would have propelled him into that elite quarterback in the draft type of ranking.
If your thesis is correct on Rattler and he somehow goes somewhere in round 1, if that team is the Vikings, will you be excited about it?
Well, I'm a Drake May guy, so
you're
I'm
in good
kind
company.
of a Drake May or bust guy right now, where I'm like, if we don't get Drake May, I'm like, damn, like we missed here. But at the same time, I do prefer that Rattler, maybe like a trading back from 23 and taking him like high in 2 or maybe at the very back end of 1. If we're getting a guy like a Byron Murphy or something at 11 and that's the alternative, that's not so bad. I think Rattler's a guy who you let him sit behind Darnold, you let him learn from Kevin O'Connell. And when he comes into Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and a healthy Hawkinson in a year or so. Like, I think that's a situation that he could really excel in. He did a lot of the play action, the rollouts, the 3-level read stuff that Kevin O'Connell does. And I think that, like, if he's going to work out, the Vikings might be that situation where he would work out in.
Okay.
Also,
Tyler,
the Jets are kind of a sneaky spot that I like.
Yeah. Just to put Aaron back in familiar territory. Tyler, what do you got? Jackson McIntire.
Yeah, I want your thoughts on JJ McCarthy. Do you think he's a viable backup option for the Vikings if they swing and miss on Drake May? Or is it more like, BPA at 11, like a Byron Murphy and a Michael Penix at 23?
I like him at 11. I like him even in a slight trade up. I really like McCarthy. I think his ceiling is higher than people give him credit for. I think his arm talent is better than people give him credit for. I think we've seen a little shift in that. People are starting to recognize that arm talent a little more now than they were a couple months ago. But I don't like him at the same cost at 3 first, getting up into the top 3 with the Patriots, maybe to kind of give that same value that we would give to trade up for Drake May. Excuse me. But I do think that he'd be a good pick. 8 through 11 range-ish. I think he's very coachable. He has the traits. He slings everything. Everything's a dart and a bullet, which is good, but he needs to learn that touch element, which is interesting because normally it's the other way around. Like the guy can't throw with the velocity and you're wishing that he would be able to throw with the velocity. It's not very common. You see someone, we've actually got 2 of them. Penix is kind of another one, although I think Penix threw with a bit more touch than McCarthy, but
it's kind of, I would say, one of the most significant developments in the Vikings orbit, or would be smoke screens, is that this idea in the last 2 days that McCarthy could fall. And it's not even fan driven. It's like, I think it started last week with ESPN's Matt Miller. He had like a draft scout mock draft. And then 33rd Team's Ari Myroth, he had the Here's What I'm Hearing. And those all of a sudden are saying that, McCarthy could slide down the board, whether that's the Vikings having to trade up to 7 or 8, as Josh has talked about the Titans before, or just falling into their lap at 11. And a week ago, if we would have said that out loud on the show or anywhere, it'd be like, you're drinking the Kool-Aid there. So it's worth noting that McCarthy feels a little bit more gettable and almost like you wouldn't even have to entertain the 3 first rounders as we get close to the draft, which is really odd to me because that was just part of the mix for a month up until now. All right, Josh, what do you got? We got time for about 2 more. What do you got for Jackson?
Yeah, so I kind of want to open it up to the entire draft as a whole. This could be somebody in the first round. If you don't want if you think the Vikings are going to just stick and pick a quarterback, whoever you want at 11 or 23, or if they trade up into day 2 or even a day 3 guy, but one draft crush this year that you hope the Vikings take.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll obviously Drake May, if not
Yeah.
like somehow a Byron Murphy thing would be cool, but I don't want to. I want to get out of the first round. So,
Okay.
someone that I really like is Renardo Green, cornerback from FSU. He's got good size. He's physical. He had great tape against Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas against LSU. Very rare that we saw that, but he matches up really well with them. He's got good hips. He's feisty. I'm surprised he's not being talked about a bit more. I think he's kind of like a mid-second roundish guy who's been talked about more as like a third round guy. So if he can be there in the 4th, or if we can get somehow trade up a bit, I think that would be a banger of a pick for the Vikings.
And go ahead, Josh.
I was just going to say, I mean, the Vikings definitely need at least some sort of help at corner. They've got a bunch of guys, but I mean, other than Shaq Griffin, maybe Mekhi Blackman, they don't really have a ton of guys to play on the boundary. Is that something that you could see Green filling in the NFL level?
Yeah. I mean, any corner in the NFL is going to take some time. So, except for, I guess, Mekhi last year. He was really freaking good. But I do think after a year or so, he's a good fit in the Flores defense, although Flores may not be here in a year. But yeah.
There we go.
I know I'm supposed to ask the final question here, but I really think the backup's good and it's worth asking. How necessary do you think it is for the Vikings to draft a wide receiver 3 now that KJ Osborne is gone?
Well, it's a really good class to do so. I think in the 4th, 5th round, there's going to be 3rd round guys all across the board, or guys whose talent would warrant like a 3rd round selection in a normal draft. So I think it's a good year to do that. It's also not that hard to get a wide receiver 3. I don't think we're particularly losing much with KJ Osborne. I know a lot of people latched on to the locker room guy who's great for Minnesota. Yeah, but he dropped a lot of passes and he just didn't make the plays we wanted him to on the field. And so I don't really buy into that too much. So we do need to fill that spot, especially with the Hawkinson injury. But I don't think it's just like you must draft a receiver. It's a good time to do it, but throughout camp, it's easy to send like a 6th or 7th round. If I was a GM, I would never have my 6th or 7th round picks. Like the value that you can get on those crapshoot picks just in a trade. Look at the Zach Wilson thing. Like, yeah, it probably amounts to nothing, but that's better than a 7th round pick. Like just the value that you can return on them is way too great. But easily, like a guy who's a good 3, maybe on a stacked receiver roster is like a 4 or 5 and he's unhappy or something. You send a 6th, 7th round pick. I mean, Keenan Allen went for a 4th rounder. Like, it's not that hard to get a 3 if you're active about it. The problem is a lot of teams are not active about it and they just settle for what they have. And then their 3 is useless out there. But yeah, that's my view on it.
So Jackson here's the anti-Rick Spielman with a point of order that he would never have those 6th or 7th rounder. Here's what happened with KJ Osborne, in my opinion, is we were so starved for half of a decade for a WR3. And when he showed up in the summer of 2021 and looked kind of like that, we were like, God, this guy is so sweet. And he was, compared to what we were used to with BC Johnson and Chad Beebe. Now we've transformed into an offense-first era with Kevin O'Connell, and now we're a little greedy. We're like, we can get somebody who doesn't drop passes. Now, Osborne was certainly clutch in 3, 4, 5 games throughout his Vikings career, like extremely clutch. But I think that we grew accustomed to a way of living where it's like, all right, Osborne was great. He got us off the schneid. He proved that you can have a WR3 and everything's okay. It's during the Zimmer era. We're like, no, we don't need one of those. All right, Jackson, let's get you off air. We know your draft preference. It happens to align with most of us on the show. But what I want is your prediction. You have the final word on VikesNow before the 2024 NFL draft. What happens for these Vikings in round 1?
Go get May.
That's the prediction.
There we go.
3 first and plus change, whatever it takes. Yeah.
Okay, and you think that will happen?
So that's like my I think that's like the most likely.
Okay.
Nothing's over 50% because there's so many different options, you know? So maybe there's like a 25% chance of that, but I think that's the highest odds of all the options happening. I think McCarthy is also highly probable. Penix might be there up there too, but yeah, I think those are probably like the top 3 most realistic, like what quarterback goes to the Vikings scenario. But yeah.
All right. I have a trade indeed. I agree with Jackson for Drake May, probably with the Patriots. Josh, what's your final prediction now that we have all of this body of quasi evidence?
You guys are gonna hate me, but I'm still on that JJ McCarthy train.
No, we don't hate you at all.
I just feel like Kwesi, with his financial background, he's not going to be a guy to go throw all these picks at a quarterback when they've made it pretty serviceable with Kirk Cousins over the past couple of years. So he's probably, I feel like his mindset is going to be, yeah, we can get a decent guy to plug that hole, and I think JJ McCarthy is that.
Okay. And Tyler, I know you've agonized like I have in terms of prediction. What have you settled on?
You know, no matter how much we like to call smoke screens, it's just, I'm nervous. Like, I'm not completely sold on the fact that the Patriots are willing to trade down from 3, especially given the fact that JJ McCarthy was actually on the Rich Eisen show, I believe it was today, and had mentioned that the Giants had met with him twice, right?
Yeah.
So if you're New England, the proposition to trade down to 11 and miss out on McCarthy is less than ideal. So it might not matter if the Vikings offer 3 first-round picks plus to try and get to 3 for Drake May. New England might just say, no, we're picking May, or no, we're picking McCarthy. And, you know, that puts us in a world of trouble. My prediction now is, Dustin would have called me crazy like a couple weeks ago when we had the fans on, but Byron Murphy at 11.
Okay.
You know, defensive tackle at 11, and then you have to end up settling for Penix at 23, or, you know, Rattler, like, you know, in the day 2. Well, we don't even have a day 2 pick, so we'd have to, you know, we'd have to like play the board, and but I'm less confident in a May trade up now. But maybe it's just all of the smoke screens coming at you at once, right? Where it's just everyone saying, oh, we're good with staying at 3. We're good at staying at 5. We're good at keeping 11 and 23. And it's working on me right now, Dustin. So
yeah, that's all right. I will work my sources tonight, and I'll try to put you at ease tomorrow, although none of us will be at ease at all. All right, Jackson, thank you.
I want to end this just with, I have heard that New England is still very much in play. The whole, they're taking Drake, whatever. I don't think that's set in stone. I think that it's very much so leverage, and I have heard that they're still strongly considering all offers.
And when you say that, you mean from people that you've established as contacts
Someone that
over
I trust.
a decade? Okay.
Yeah,
not just like, you know, clutchpoints.com or some shit like that.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pony Pauline. But quick thing for you. If you're able to share, when exactly did you hear this? Is this recent? Is this stale?
Oh, Tyler, pinning him down.
I first heard this a couple months ago, or a month and a half maybe. I tweeted it, I think, end of March, back when New England was considered to very much be off the table. And we've since now seen they came on it. Then now people are saying, they're kind of off it. So I doubled back. I probed a little bit about that. And yeah, it's from what I've heard and from someone that I trust, they're very much still considering trading out of 3. Now, I don't know how that will finalize, but
the last like 48 hours. You've heard that?
Yes, yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there you go, Tyler. Maybe that can get you right back on the train.
Yeah,
all
back
right.
on the May train, baby.
Jackson, we appreciate it. Hopefully you enjoyed yourself and you'll come back on sometime in May or June so we can start to look at this roster. All right.
Absolutely. Yeah. This was a great time.
Thank you, sir.
Right.
You guys have a wonderful draft. Take it easy.
Yep. Thanks, guys.